Welcome, everyone, and thank you for joining today's National Arts Club virtual program, From Access to Art, the Impact of AI on Video. My name is Joshua Ness, and I'm a member of the Art and Technology Committee here at the National Arts Club. For anyone who's unfamiliar with the National Arts Club, we are a 501c3 nonprofit organization based in New York City with a mission to stimulate, foster, and promote public interest in the arts. Every year, the club offers more than 150 free programs to the public, both virtual and in person at our historic clubhouse and art gallery in New York City, including exhibitions, theatrical and music performances, lectures, and readings. For more information about the National Arts Club, you can visit us at nationalartsclub.org or find us on Facebook, Instagram, and YouTube. On behalf of our Art and Technology Committee, it's my pleasure to welcome you to today's event, featuring Amanda Needham, the Managing Director of the Telly Awards, as well as a panel of generative AI developers, accessibility, and multimedia pioneers. Together, we'll explore the various and growing applications of AI in video, from enhancing accessibility to pushing the boundaries of creative expression and streamlining distribution. Following the discussion will be a brief Q&A, so please use the Q&A function for any questions you might have. You can also use the chat function to engage with fellow attendees, but be aware that only the questions asked in the Q&A window will be addressed during the program. Without further ado, it's my pleasure to introduce Amanda Needham, Managing Director of the Telly Awards. Welcome, Amanda.
Hi, Josh. It is great to be here. I'm going to queue up our agenda sort of for the rest of the event so that everyone can be abreast on what we're doing. As Joshua mentioned, I am the Managing Director of the Telly Awards, and the Telly Awards are a 45-year-old global award institution. We get about 13,000 entries a year across branded content, commercials and marketing, immersive and VR, social video, non-broadcast, and original shows and series. And in addition to hosting an award show every year and honoring the best work we see across video and television, we also hold conversations about things that are relevant to our industry from the various corners that we see it from. So we've hosted panels on sustainability, accessibility, social impact, and this conversation on AI I'm very excited to dig into with you and all of the people on the call. So I would love to introduce the panelists that are going to be speaking today. In terms of a point of process, before I bring them on, I'm going to we'll talk with each of them individually after I give an intro to all of them, and then we'll have time for all of us to chat and then informally bring in questions from the audience as well. I do want to bring your attention to the screen, though. We've put together there's going to be a resource guide based on all the conversations and things mentioned in this panel. And so if you scan that QR code or you go to tlly.co/guide, you can pop your name in and we'll be sure to follow up with an email to get you the resources that we're referring to and some of the big ideas that are discussed. So without further ado, I'd like to bring our three panelists on screen so I could give you a brief intro to who they all are. We have, and I hope you can see all of them, and their names are also listed there. So Kento Morita is going to be our first presenter. He's a conversation designer at Google Gemini, a SAG-AFTRA actor who's actually had his likeness scanned for use in video game like Rise of the Ronin. And he's also the artist behind Moment in Manzanar, which is an interactive educational film featuring a conversational experience powered by AI. And he's going to walk us through the process of that, and you'll get to see it in action. We're also joined today by Matthew Kaplowitz. Matthew, can you wave your hand so they know it's you? Matthew is the President and Director of Technology and Innovation for Bridge Multimedia, which is the largest producer of audio description for network and cable TV in the United States. They do everything from captioning, live translation, dubbing, and audio descriptions. And Matthew is an Emmy, Peabody, and Grammy Award-winning producer, composer, sound designer, and assistive listening systems engineer, as well as an AV systems integration specialist. So he is the tinkerer and the mind behind how all these systems can come together and actually expand what we see on screen and hear on screen. So I'm excited to have him bring his expertise to the table. And finally, we're joined by Shelby Ward, and her partner, Caleb Ward, will join for the Q&A at the end. Shelby is the co-founder, along with Caleb, and she's the COO of Curious Refuge. Curious Refuge is the world's first online home for AI storytellers and artists, and they utilize AI and train creatives to use AI to create the future of storytelling. She has a background in VFX and special effects originally, but is a filmmaker in her own right, and has quite a provocative film to share with us to really dig into all the edges of the questions around generative AI and what it is, how it works, and what it could be. So that is all for me in terms of presenting how this flow will go. But Joshua, I wanted, you had sometimes when we pull people together, it's great to have the opportunity to create a frame for the frame, right? So we could talk about the ins and outs in AI to death, but Joshua and I really wanted to have this conversation be a bit of a higher level thought process. And so Josh, you have some thoughts on how we should be thinking about AI as we listen to this panel. I'd love you to share them with everyone.
I do, and thank you, Amanda. And it's wonderful to meet all of our panelists. I'm very excited to hear what you have to present here today. One of the reasons why we're having this discussion on behalf of the Art and Technology Committee at the National Arts Club is because the definition of art is constantly evolving. And one of the more recent uh, uh, instances where something was vehemently described as not art, but eventually became to be known, recognized as an art form, is photography. Starting in the mid-19th century, the debate about what constitutes art began including the revolutionary new medium of photography. And many people believed that photography could not be art because it was made by a machine rather than by human creativity. And I'm sure this sounds familiar to our audience. It was seen as a threat to real art as early as 1839. And some held the view that photography could be useful to real artists, such as for reference, but should not be considered as equal to drawing or painting. And ultimately, photography had a profound and unexpected effect on painting, driving painters away from visual realism and toward different forms of abstraction. And truth be told, the National Arts Club was one of the first official arts organizations to recognize photography as an art form, which is now recognized worldwide. And so the question we're posing to you, our audience, in an interactive portion of this webinar or this video is this: Is AI art actually art? Does it deserve a place in the conversation of creative expression? And we have a poll that we're going to put up here for you right now. And we want to know what you think here before we have this conversation. And then we're going to ask the same question again. We want to see if your attitude toward this has changed. Hopefully we can pull that poll up here. Is it up? There we go. Is AI art really art? Let us know what you think. Go ahead and answer. We'll leave this up for a few minutes, for a minute or so. Amanda, I know you have had thoughts about this. Similar to the National Arts Club, it's constantly a conversation of what is currently in the zeitgeist that deserves to be qualified as art. Is that correct?
It is, and I'm trying to click my answer and I can't because I'm a host or a panelist, and I had a fast answer on that one. I'm not going to share what it was, but I was like, click, 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 click. So, we'll see. I mean, I will say so at the Tellys, because we have such a breadth of work we honor. It's anything made with video. So it could end up being employee communications or it could be marketing. But every year we assess, like, what are industry standards? What are people playing with? What is no longer being used? And we actually change our categories and what we honor to stay relevant every year. Generative AI is a category this year. We think it is something that is worth dabbling in and understanding more and opening space for. But we also remove categories as they no longer become relevant. So that's not to say it is necessarily or it isn't. It's just, it's happening right now. And that's sort of our approach.
When I talk about this with people, I tend to go towards everyone's favorite sci-fi drama, Star Trek: The Next Generation. which is when you think about Mid-Journey, something that is made with Mid-Journey, an early stage AI a visual program, or even now GPT-4 can create artistic expression. That's done by a computer somewhere in the cloud. However, in the show Star Trek, Data, the character, is a humanoid robot, but he paints. He paints with an actual paintbrush and a canvas. And so, how are those two things different? Is one of them art because it was created with actual brush strokes versus the other, which was created using just generative AI? I don't necessarily have the answer to that question. I think it's worth a debate, and I'm looking forward to kind of diving into some of that today. It looks like we've reached some totality here in the poll, with 85% saying yes and 15% saying no. So I'll be excited to see if that changes here towards the end of our conversation.
Interesting. Now I'm feeling like I should take it on the other side. The other thing I'll add to this sort of framing here is I used to do a lot of work in remix video, which is sort of an art form that takes from snippets of other work to reframe it. And there's a definition of how much you're allowed to take from copyrighted material and how 10 seconds or whatever. And Disney's one of the sort of classic folks. They don't want anything shared, but there's really great artistic interpretations called political remix videos that are reframing other people's art to make a different point, and that is considered art, but using it's like collage with video. So again, AI is like a rapid version of that. Consent and all of that do play into it, but let's dig in. So I would like to bring Kento onto the stage. Kento, we've had some wonderful conversations leading up to this. And Matthew, if you could turn off your video so that I can just have Kento here. Uh, leading up to this conversation, and as I said before, Kento works at Google. He's actually a conversation developer, but he also is an actor himself and has developed your own piece of art called Moment in Manzanar, which we're going to show you today. Kento, can you just give us sort of before we play your piece and then interact with it, can you frame a little bit this project for us and how you came to it, and then afterwards we'll talk a bit about what it opened up for you.
Yeah, sure. Thank you. Thanks so much for the intro, Amanda. As you mentioned, I work in AI during the day, and during the evenings, I do theater, I do acting, I do voice acting, and literally, my digital likeness was scanned for a video game. So, needless to say, I feel very passionately nuanced, I would say, about the intersection of AI and art. I picketed with SAG at Netflix, wearing this shirt.
Right.
Against their policies around AI. But at the same exact time, I am working on AI because I do think it's a very impactful force. I do think that a lot of companies don't have the best interests, human interests in mind. Um, but how we integrate AI in art is something I feel very passionately about, and we should be actively engaged in it. And it's something we need to address. And Moment in Manzanar is my way of proposing a way we can integrate AI into art. And so, a little bit of background. Moment in Manzanar is a interactive experience where the user or the audience is brought into this conversation with an AI. And you are led to ask the questions 27 and 28 in the loyalty questionnaire, which was a questionnaire that was given to all Japanese Americans. This will be explained in the movie that will play. But basically, Joel Nokata, who wrote the book No No Boy, writes in a letter to his editor that only in fiction could you capture some of the nuances, the joys and the sorrows of historic events. And my proposal here is that through this fictional conversation, hopefully you could get the emotional truth of the tragedy of the incarceration of Japanese people during 1942, but also practically speaking, this project was built by humans, but it was extremely important for me that every person, the artist, the film editor, the programmer, and the UX designer, and myself included, to be compensated fairly. And they were. We went by market rates. I told them up front, I need to pay you fairly for this to work as a statement piece. And we were able to do this in part because of an artist grant that we received from Inworld AI. So big shout out to them. But what we're trying to say is that we were able to win some awards with this, an Anthem Award being one of them. A team of 5 with not so much, not a team of 500 was able to pay people fairly and create impactful art using AI. If we could do it, sure as heck Netflix could do it. Sure as heck Spotify could do it. All these companies could do it. So that is our statement that is underlying this whole thing. The story that is presented here is very personal to me. I'm Japanese American, but I just wanted to say that if we could do it, a big corporation could definitely do it. And this is our thesis.
Totally. And well, we'll get into it afterwards. So this piece, it has a lead in that's a normal video, and then we'll actually be able to interact and try to access some of that emotional experience of history as a result of AI. So let's play it.
Thank you.
1942, Franklin D. Roosevelt signed and issued Executive Order 9066, which led to the incarceration of at least 120,000 people of Japanese descent, 2/3 of them American citizens. These people were stripped of their livelihood without due process, in violation of their Fifth Amendment rights. In 1943, the incarcerated were given a loyalty questionnaire, with questions 27 and 28 being most controversial. Question 27 asked whether they will be willing to serve in combat for the United States. Question 28 asked whether they would forswear allegiance to the Japanese emperor, a loaded question asking about an emperor that ruled over a land that many of them have never stepped foot in. Those who answered no and no to those questions were called no-nos. They were considered potential enemies of the state and taken to maximum security prisons. You are about to meet Ichiro, a fictional Japanese American incarcerated in the Manzanar concentration camp.
All right. And so the next slide is the actual website that you are at when you see this.
February 19th.
Next one. Yep. And so what happens, walk us through this. So I'm a user, Kento. So I've arrived at this screen. I can ask a question. Is that right?
That's right. So your job is to get his answers to questions 27 and 28 on the loyalty questionnaire. You're playing the part of a war relocation agent. And once you do, you need to process him.
So can I ask him like anything I want? Can I?
Yes.
Okay. So can I ask him, how do you feel about FDR? How do you feel about the president, the real president
Sure.
of this country, apparently? I don't know. How do you feel about and not the highway in New York City, if you're in New York City? So he's responding FDR. Is there sound?
If you press continue, and
Okay.
there's
Okay. Now there's a name. You see, Mr. Roosevelt was the president who signed the executive order that led to the internment of. It's hard not to feel anger when I think about that. Interesting.
it's a cut off the last part of it in the window. You can kind of scroll down, but not anymore.
Okay, so he's just answered a question. I mean, imagine being forced from your home, losing everything you've worked for, and being locked up behind barbed wire just because of your ancestry.
So this answer is generated by a custom tuned large language model
Okay.
that I built. And if you just hit continue continuously, it will get to
So it's back to ask him. So I can interact with this character. And ultimately, I mean, like I might ask him, why does he feel angry? Do you feel angry about things a lot, Ichiro? Like that starts to make me, be like, I don't know about this dude.
Yeah, and you can ask him any question. And what we found through testing this, basically a soft opening, if you will, in theater parlance, we found that after 2 or 3 questions, people usually start to get creative and they start to ask questions that are not really appropriate or not even relevant.
Right.
People are asking about, how do you feel about Elon Musk? And Elon Musk doesn't even exist in this
Right.
timeline. So we decided to imbue the character with a consistent anger. So the Ichiro could cut off the user after 2 or 3 conversational turns. It'll basically it'll get really angry at you, saying, "You're wasting my time. Why don't
Right.
you ask me those questions?" Which is a very motivated choice. So we wanted to make sure that we call them error recovery in conversation design, was motivated by the character. And I think
Right.
that's where the intersection of AI and art come in, is we're trying to make sure to accommodate the failings of the state of the art AI by using techniques from drama, from improv. I've been doing improv for 13 years um, to make sure that experience is on average the best experience they should get. And but that having been said, um, when you go to Berlin and you go to the Holocaust Memorial, it is a very somber moment. There's context setting. There's
Right.
signs and postage that tell you this is a place of remembrance. But there's always people who are taking selfies. There's people who are jumping across the statues. It's really, really uncouth, but it does happen. But those people are far and less between. They're maybe 1% of the experience. 99% of the people there are experiencing the magnitude and the sorrow. To make people feel that way, or incentivize them to engage in this art piece in that way, we created that movie. So initially, that movie didn't even
Right.
exist, but we created that movie so the audience is most likely to experience this in the way that we want. And we added these conversational escape hatches, if you will, also to keep people on what we call the happy path.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of iteration that went into this to make it the way it is right now.
It's amazing. It's so nuanced. It's like, I mean, when I watch this and experience it the second time, it is, you have created a character. You have enabled a play to happen in, but not in a theater, right? Like, and so I could watch a film about this, but like my mind goes to a different place when I'm like, I wonder how he feels. I wonder if I could ask this question. And so like the closed context of this really is an interesting example of accessibility to the historical story, to the emotional place, and an artistic experience that you've done, which I frankly think speaks wonders to me about the potential for what we're doing here. I want to come back to this, and I also want to, so thank you, Kento, for sharing what your project was. Do you have anything like anything else you'd like to end with, sort of about this experience that you built, or the experience of making it as a maker, that you think is important to leave us with as we consider other applications?
Sure. So Ichiro's expression right now, that's actually my face. So I wrote a 7-minute monologue and practiced it as a monologue and shot it and had a real artist hand draw Ichiro's face. And he picked the different moments of my emotional eruptions in the monologue to be used for Ichiro. So the only element of AI here is what Ichiro is saying, his expressions, the background art, the UI, the font choices, the typeface choices, those were all human, and they were fairly compensated. So we really wanted to make sure that delineation was very clear, and that, again, they were compensated fairly in market rate.
Yeah, thank you. Awesome. All right, Matthew, may I please bring you onto this virtual stage? Mr. Kaplowitz, hello. We're gonna switch gears here, and Matthew's actually gonna guide us through his short presentation, because basically whenever I speak with Matthew, he's like, oh yeah, that's easy. I'll just do it. I'll build a model for you. I'll just demonstrate it. And I'm always kind of blown away. So Janae, if you can actually stop sharing, and then we'll allow Matthew to. But so Matthew, works for Bridge Multimedia. He's the president, director of technology, and his day-to-day is imagining how to create accessibility for the kind of video content that we currently have through audio descriptions and subtitles and transcribing and all of that. And you build the systems to do that. Is that correct, sir?
Yes. That's
Yeah.
right.
And when we first talked, we were discussing the difference in my mind between generative AI and utilitarian AI, and sort of the hubbub is about generative AI, like, oh, it's taking over the art, but the utilitarian side of it, how can we use these technologies to actually scale access, to scale interaction with current art or current content media? And you had a number of ideas and are already in practice thinking in your own company about how that can happen, and are even able to demonstrate to us what's possible if we start to open our minds up to integrating AI in an accessibility workflow, at least. Is that right?
Yes. So thanks. Nice to be here, and thanks for the invitation. And just to explain what you're talking about, one of the and let me just one of the things in terms of art and equity and inclusion in where we are today is making art accessible to everyone. And this goes beyond only things like enabling it for people who are deaf or who are blind, but the largest part of the disability population are people with cognitive disabilities. So one of the things for people with cognitive disabilities is the complexity of language to be able to enjoy the art. And plain language is a style of communication that's used to create easy to read, concise, and clear information. So looking at these two elements of utilitarian and generative AI, utilitarian is construction informed, uses a storehouse of data and machine learning to analyze and process. Generative uses non-traditional machine learning and training data to modify and create content. So in order to give an idea of what this is, I randomly went on to YouTube and found a clip of a college professor speaking at a grade 14 level in terms of standardized testing for that. And I'm going to play you 30 seconds of what she's talking about, which is generative AI.
And this is just a straight YouTube clip. Like,
Yep.
Okay.
For many years, researchers, businesses, civil society advocates, and policymakers have discussed the variety of societal and environmental impact of predictive AI systems. These are socio-technical systems. If not designed, procured, and governed in a responsible way, AI systems can amplify stereotypes and extreme worldviews, can result in discriminatory outcomes, limitation or denial of access to resources or opportunities, or infringement of rights and freedoms.
So that's what she told us. Now, what we're going to
And
do
that was
now,
captioned normally? Like, that was just a
Yeah.
generative caption that your company does, or yeah.
now we're going to play now. So what we did was we have a program that is proprietary, and it looks at language, and it can put it at any other grade level. So a person that is not, for example, many individuals with learning disabilities go to college. The graduation rate's not so great, and part of it is the complexity and the understanding. So here in real time, we took that same speech, ran it through, but then after having it recreate the text, then we put it into an AI captioning platform and created simultaneous AI captions, and then output the text from the captions into AI speech. So this is now the same thing again, just 30 seconds of what you just heard. And we didn't try to lip sync what the professor was saying with the AI voice. Rather, another program that's used for film dubbing was put into play to just do sort of general placement. So now here's an AI voice with AI captions, and a third AI device doing placement, taking that same 30 seconds.
To a grade 8 level, to a lower cognitive understanding level. Okay.
For many years, schools, companies, and people working to improve society have talked about logical AI systems, how they could affect society and the environment. AI must be made and used responsibly. Otherwise, AI could increase unfair judgment of people and increase radical views. It might also limit or deny some people's opportunities and decrease their freedoms.
Wow. Okay. I understood that. She did not use socio-technical.
Right. Yeah. And just briefly, it goes way beyond education, just people enjoying film, people enjoying television, but also when we talk about inclusion and when we talk about equity, this means when there's health education, when there's financial literacy, when there's community advocacy, when there's emergency communication, all of these represent areas that the ability to bring all of this together has a very, very powerful role to play.
Thank you so much for that, Matthew. And it blows my mind a little bit. Like when I see that, I'm like, oh, what is possible? Can you give us the brief backstory of how you came into this in the beginning? Because I feel like the way you have approached inclusivity and accessibility is like a key framework to keep in mind as we think about a framework for AI as the next phase of that. Like that ethical sort of accessibility, equity framework is an interesting one.
I have a deafblind daughter, and first role as a parent is looking out for her and advocating for her through her education. And she's an adult now, and through her education and job process. And along the way, of course, I saw a lot of gaps, and so I put my focus towards it. Is the short answer to it.
And when you're thinking and visualizing this with the tools that you already have at your disposal, what are you able to imagine? I mean, this is one thing. You just imagined this. This doesn't happen, but it could happen, and you just made it happen. There are other things you imagine just with your lay of the land of what's needed for real inclusivity.
Yeah, again, just very briefly, the thing is to create a way of having inclusivity that is sort of the analog to what Adobe does with all its products. It has a whole ecosystem between Illustrator and Photoshop and Premiere and Fire. By the way, the images in that were created in Firefly. And so it's to develop a ecosystem that can accommodate all of those things in the same ecosystem instead of one piece here and one piece there.
Yeah, cool. Thank you so much for sharing that demonstration. That was really awesome. I would like to bring Shelby onto the stage to bring home our finale here of what's possible with AI. So Shelby runs Curious Refuge, which both teaches and uses AI in like modern day video storytelling. And you have a piece you're going to share that was completely generated by AI, right? You can frame a little bit for us. And please do frame. So what I would like to say to the group is, if you're not familiar with Milli Vanilli, this is like a very interesting case study because this is an AI documentary, 2 words that people might be most scared of to hear in the same word. Milli Vanilli, the Milli Vanilli story, which you'll hear though in a nutshell, is that it was a group of artists who were given a Grammy signifying high excellence as artists. And then that Grammy was taken away because it was revealed that they were lip syncers. And the question was, what is real artistry? And so it's just like metaphor upon metaphor here, Shelby, or like, I don't know what to say, but there's a lot all in one. So please introduce yourself a little bit and tell us what we're about to experience.
Oh, thank you so much, Amanda. And I am just blown away by all of the conversation so far today. Matthew, Kento, thank you both. I'm just honored to be speaking alongside you. And yeah, so this is so funny. It's like the, what is it? Inception a little bit with like like you're talking about. And so yeah, this is a really interesting story. You know, it was actually a commission project by Sony, which is really interesting. And they were given the Milli Vanilli catalog and wanted their team to be aligned on what the story was. And so they needed a quick explainer video showcasing the Milli Vanilli story. So they were just like, make it fun, like make it light, let's be factual, hit all of the story beats of what actually happened. So yeah, I would love to watch it, and then maybe we can chat a bit about it.
Yeah, so we'll watch it, and then you'll break down what went into it and a little bit about your thoughts about it. So let's do that.
Thank you.
Welcome to the 80s, a time of jazzercise, Rubik's Cubes, mullets, leg warmers, shoulder pads, and the biggest scandal in pop music history, Milli Vanilli. The year is 1987. A group from Maryland called Newmarks writes a song called Girl, You Know It's True.
People in America are going to love this.
They didn't, but someone in Germany saw potential for the song.
This song is totally tubular.
Fab Morvan and Rob Pilatus have become breakdancing sensations. They are attractive, cool, and most importantly, marketable. A music producer named Frank Farian sees an opportunity and decides to re-record his own version of Girl, You Know It's True, using session singers Brad Howell, John Davis, Charles Shaw, Jody Rocco, and Linda Rocco.
That sounded great, guys. The band is going to love it.
Frank signs Rob and Fab to be the face of Milli Vanilli, and Girl, You Know It's True becomes a mega hit around the world. They were huge. Milli Vanilli's debut album goes 6 times platinum in the US and diamond in Canada.
Hey, should this thing be plugged in?
Details, Rob, details.
It was an almost flawless plan. However, cracks appear in the facade. During an MTV festival in Connecticut, a playback glitch exposes Rob and Fab as lip syncers. The rumor mill starts circulating, but nothing sticks. And then the unimaginable happens.
And the winner of the 1990 Grammy for Best New Artist is Milli Vanilli.
However, Fab and Rob are sick of lip syncing, so they press Frank to let them sing or get out of their contract. Frank, feeling cornered, hosts a shocking press conference, admitting that Rob and Fab never really sang, but we're fabulous stage performers.
It's fine that they didn't sing the songs, right?
The Grammys disagreed.
We're taking this back now.
Fans felt angry and betrayed. Frank releases a new album titled The Real Milli Vanilli, featuring the original session singers.
I always believed in you guys.
But it's too late. The name Milli Vanilli is stained forever. Unfortunately, in the aftermath, Rob Pilatus was found dead in a hotel in Frankfurt due to a drug and alcohol overdose. Fab, on the other hand, continues to make his own music even to this day. And that's the story of how 2 lip syncers became prominent voices of a generation, and how the music of Milli Vanilli lives on.
Okay, awesome. Okay. So what's interesting, I recommend everyone check that out on YouTube because there's like a music bed underneath it and it's the Milli Vanilli song. So you can't really hear it super well in the playback, but it adds a lot to the documentary. But Yeah, so that was such an interesting project that they came to with, and so perfect, right? As we're having this conversation about AI and what is art, and I'm a huge fan now of Rob and Fab, and I do feel they are artists, and it's a tragic story.
Okay. Yeah.
You know, it's a tragic story. I wonder if society would have been as harsh to them if today the same story would have come out, you know, versus in the early 90s. And so it's just interesting to think about.
I mean, the four things they mentioned are they were attractive, they were cool, they were marketable, and then musicians. But to be honest, can they sing is like one of four. Like most artists are those other things. Like, I don't know, what is the most primary? Is it I don't know. Anyways.
It's interesting. Yeah, it's really interesting. And it's interesting to see that they were musicians as well, right? Like Fab is still making music. And so I'm just like, why did they not work with him, you know, originally? But it's such a sad story. But, you know, putting that together was very exciting for me because it was an opportunity to really explore and test these tools in this context, right? Like documentary, like that's fascinating. What can we do without like the only assets I was given? And if we can go to the next slide. So really quickly,
incredibly unified palette, like there's a lot going on. Yeah. So tell us
a
how you
lot of curation. Yeah. And so a little bit really quick about me at Curious Refuge, if it's okay. So at Curious Refuge, we are like you mentioned, thank you for the intro. We're an online home for AI storytellers. And so we have an AI filmmaking course, an AI advertising course, and we're helping to contextualize these tools for creatives to use them in their workflows. And so our vision is to be a bridge for artists. So we see like artists over here and maybe AI is over here, and it feels very daunting, right? And our hope is to be a bridge to empower artists to learn these tools and to use them. And so my background is in education, actually. So I worked in animation and motion design education and then VFX up until 10 months ago. So teaching artists like traditional VFX, like Houdini, Nuke, Unreal Engine. I helped to run the school that did that. So that's a bit about me. But when it comes to Milli Vanilli, if you can go to the next slide, I'll walk through a little bit of this project. So Sony reached out, and this was in September. So you watch this film, and it's interesting because there are already things I'm like, oh, we could have done that better because the tools have changed so much since this was created. But it still holds up. So that's amazing. So we had about 2 weeks to put this together, and I was given these assets. So I had like the facts of their story and a few images to work with. So I began with research and really trying to understand who they were, who are all these characters, these session singers, all these different musicians. So really trying to work that out. And then I used ChatGPT as a research assistant, really checking my facts. But it's helpful to use these language models, these tools as like a launching off point. And I really think that's what they're great for. Like, don't take it as the final product, but use chat and you can say, can you help build a 90-second script based on this subject? And in a few seconds, you can have that, right? I can then say, okay, now would you create a shot list for me? And what's funny is in this example here, my shot that it said we should start with is we're diving headfirst into the zany world of Milli Vanilli with a character diving into a pool. And so if you go to the next slide, you'll see that chat wanted me to start with this image.
Terrifying. That is
it's
definitely
interesting.
A round human. Yeah.
It's giving belly flop more than like compelling start to our film. So with all of our projects at Curious Refuge, we build them a lot like you would an animation workflow. So we start with the radio cut of the project. So we'll begin with casting our voices and like cutting for that first. So we won't really have visuals to start with. So then I go into I started to build a mood board for this story, and I used Pinterest for that. So really trying to curate. I love that you noticed the visual consistency because
very consistent. So you had to have a mood way you were prompting and light cues that were consistent to get that look. You have to know that language too.
Yeah. And directing your prompts, because you can go in and if you have something, you can direct it further by, you know, refining your prompt. And so you can use a lot of these image generator tools as like research tools as well. So for example, in Midjourney, they have an explore feature. And so I can go in and I can search 1980s aesthetic and research what are other people prompting to get this certain visual. And so that is one of my favorite tips. I use it all the time. But I also like love to see what the community is prompting. It's very, very fun. It's like kind of my new social media. I will just be on the explore page scrolling because it's very fun. So then you can enlarge in the image and see exactly what someone prompted. And then if you go to the next slide. So then I generate all my images, and this takes the longest, honestly. It's so much work just like prompting and curating and really finalizing your shots. And here are a few examples that didn't work. So if you see these socks here, these are leg warmers according to AI. So that took some refining to try to really get what we needed. And then these two guys here, you see something's coming out of his nose, his arm is fusing into his leg. You have some hallucinations in AI as well. So you get a lot more bad visuals than you do good. And so it does take curation and refining. And on the next slide. Thank you. And so then there are a few steps I left out because it's a lot of steps and we're trying to squeeze it in here.
Yeah.
But basically I would up-res my images and then we do a storyboard cut. So I'll start to pull those images and then cut for the story. And then I'll start to mark the shots where I'm going to use video generation tools to create animation or do traditional and VFX, maybe in After Effects. And so I'll start to kind of plan that out in the timeline. And then, yeah, so for this story, we actually used, sorry, Insight Face Swap. This is a tool for character consistency. That's something that AI struggles with right now, is character consistency. So there are things that still need a lot of improvement, but there are some tools that help you to get the results you're looking for. But that's a bit of the project breakdown. It took a lot of human intervention to put this together. But yeah.
No, I mean, I think it's so important to lay all that out because I think a lot of times, the first question is like, oh, they made that with AI and oh, they did it so quickly, no one's going to have a job. But when you're able to, I mean, it may or may not be true, but when you're able to break down the process, as someone who is a video editor, who has been a producer, like there is so much craft that is still going into this, and curation might be a different sort, but you're clearly crafting your story using different tools. Maybe at one point you would have done this with stock footage. Is that any different? Like, because if you don't have the budget to go out and fully shoot, like there's a place for all of this work to play.
Yeah, that's a really interesting point. I agree.
But so do you feel, Shelby, though, and we'll bring Caleb on and everyone else on for our final 5 and 10 for questions. But I mean, do you think that the nature of your art form, you as an artist, that the nature of your art has changed when you introduce AI? Do you think it is different than like whatever you were doing before? Like, how do you internalize that?
It's interesting because, I've helped run multiple companies. And so I've always been more of producer on projects. And for me to be able to, this is really my project. And I was able to have so much creative influence on it and say, and honestly, that was so much fun for me as someone who I would define myself as a creative, but my experience in terms of like, work, it's been more of the producer, like getting the artists on the projects. And I still have that. We have a team of artists working with us at Curious Refuge. Unfortunately, no one was available to take this one on. So it was on me, which was an awesome challenge. And I would absolutely say it was so much fun. I don't know if I answered your question. I'm sorry about that.
Well, but what's interesting, and let's actually bring, so Kento and Matthew, if you guys can come back, if you all can come back on, and Joshua, please. One of the things Kento said as well in the beginning was, like, I had this idea for a project. I couldn't have done it without this. Like I was actually enabled to go to a different layer in my own artistic practice as a result of having this tool. Would you agree with that, Kento and Shelby? Like that? And
yeah.
Yeah.
Absolutely. I think in this case of the Milli Vanilli story, like these assets don't really exist, right? They have a biopic and a film coming out and they needed to get their team in alignment quickly. But like we're telling a story where we don't have visuals to tell that story of them being in the booth, like recording as session singers, And what's really fascinating is once we launched this on YouTube, Jody and Linda Rocco, the original session singers, commented on the piece and said, like, thank you so much. I loved the video. And there was a person who commented and said, I feel cheated because I feel this isn't historical footage. And Jody Rocco commented and said, "But trust me, it's incredibly accurate." And I was just like, "Yes, thank you." That felt good. I'm sharing someone's story, and that they felt it was, representing them well. That was really awesome.
Well, so yeah, sorry, Kenta, go. Yeah.
Yeah, if I may add, I think with my project, being able to talk to an actor that is portraying a historic character. I think some of you may have done this, that wax museum project where every kid is assigned a historical figure. They stand still, and when the parent, presses the button, they tell you a historical fact about, Abe Lincoln or what have you. It's basically kind of like that with more steps. And to have an actor stand there 24/7 being available, and being able to answer questions from multiple people all at the same time is just simply impossible. So I really do think this was the only way to do it, unless I wanted to employ 50 actors who are well versed in the character biography and will stand. And I think that is a perfectly valid art piece as well. It's just I wanted to do it within a low five-figure budget, which I think couldn't have been done with real people ethically.
And I think that raises a question that someone asked in the Q&A, Kento, and getting back to also what Shelby was saying about the legality and the, let's say you do want to save that resource and employ artificial intelligence to recreate these historical representations and do it in a commercial setting. Are there any laws governing that? And I imagine the answer is no, not that anyone here is an attorney, but where do you see the law coming down on that to where artificial intelligence can be used to recreate something that actually happened, that may or may not influence someone's views on that particular event?
Sorry, what's the question?
Yeah, it's in the Q&A function. And
can you use it in a commercial context? Is there a legal issue with using this commercially versus just in the artistic realm if you start to make money off it? And that does become a question. But I mean, Shelby, you were commissioned to make that work by Sony Music. That, I don't know, that.
Yeah, I mean, that's so interesting. And this was back in September, right? So I feel like it was in the heat of, I mean, it's a hot topic right now, but I feel like early on they saw potential for at least getting their team aligned using these tools, and using them to tell this story.
I think,
yeah, go on.
So this book, No Boy, none of the events that happen in this book are particularly historically accurate, but it's considered one of the most emotionally accurate depictions of Japanese American experience right after World War II. So if this author used the medium of the written word to portray a way too rosy view of Japanese American experience, for example, or an ahistoric view, to imply something that is completely off mark. I think there's ethical issues there, but I don't think there are legal protections there. There hasn't been, and I'm not a legal expert, but given that people have been able to do it, it's difficult to see how that's going to. I'm thinking out loud here though, because I do think that there is some kind of of the fact barriers to so there's a publisher, there's an editor, and you can't create a person could only create maybe 10 books in their lifetime, unless you're Stephen King and you could write 20 books every year. So there is like a limit to how many things you could produce. But with AI, I think you could produce things every minute. You could come up with alternative histories. And I think that sort of scale in the hands of very many, I could totally see people starting to use governance as a tool to make sure this technology is used safely. So I changed my mind. I think there will be.
No, but the question, it's not clear yet. And the scale is a level to it. And I just want to round part of this up, that in each of your conversations, you have each offered an element to be thought of in terms of like an ethical framework for considering AI and art. And you did it in different ways. Like there was a discussion, and to Josh's original question, like if we're going to consider this sort of art, or we're going to help define this, what is the frame that these questions need to be asked within? One of those is an ethical approach to like representation. I mean, it's like you could be using these pieces, but if you're telling a story that is like putting the words in the mouth of a president, like that's different than using these pieces to tell an accurate representation of history. You also talked about equity, inclusivity, the importance of an integrated sort of system and understanding, being compensated fairly, not having it replace, but like be done right. Like these are all really great edge markers for defining things when it then comes down to legal questions of, is this right or is this wrong? That I think we should all be, I think that's the starting point. That's as far as sort of I can imagine getting. Caleb is just joining the conversation though. And you talk about generative AI a lot. Do you have anything to add to that? Like the framing for how we could be thinking about this stuff?
Yeah, I mean, like we say all the time, for using AI, it is a tool. It's a creative tool in a pipeline, and I think that it's easy to push back, like it's already been discussed, against new innovations in technology. But I think that the creative potential to tell stories and to, especially from like a documentary perspective, to tell stories that normally wouldn't have had assets that could have helped you to get that story out there is very powerful.
Yeah, we have an interesting example for our holiday competition we ran with our community. One of the winners is actually a couple who are in Kiev, Ukraine. So they actually put together a story about their experience around the holidays in light of the war. And that was fascinating because like they don't have, like, they're putting together this really powerful, compelling story using assets that don't exist, right? To share what they went through. And so that was incredible, very moving.
I mean, and Matthew's piece, those words were not said, but there was the gestation of truth that happened that then the meaning was enabled. It's like by adding that layer, you're able to touch like meaning and intention and then give it place faster when used in the right way.
And just to hop in quickly on that point, to the same thing in terms of what Kento was saying and about, I'm sorry, wrong slide, about people being fairly compensated as well as the, jobs and so on. In this process, there's at least 4 points where there is human interaction, and most of these are new jobs. So even as other jobs, and we do with some of our other work, extensive AI voice for things, and we have created jobs, more than 30% of our workforce are people with disabilities. And we find that many of the people for checking the quality of the work, whether it's AI or otherwise, these are new jobs. It's part of that long, ever-growing list of jobs that didn't exist even 5 years ago. And they're good paying jobs. They're not minimum wage jobs. And they're jobs that people can be trained on, particularly as we're building the accessibility tools that lets people who are blind use these tools and so on. So sometimes it's not the same job, but it's a rich source for new employment, which is part of the equity picture.
Joshua, there's 2 other questions in the chat, but it is exactly 8 o'clock. How would you like to moderate this experience? We can, yeah.
Yeah, I think we can discuss those as we are asking the audience to once again let us know what you think, and if we can launch that that poll one more time. We've heard over the past hour about AI as a useful tool, as an economic driver, as a way to reach out to communities, as a way to connect with the deep roots of our ancestry and of other shared experiences, lived experiences. And so, very curious what you think. Everyone here in our audience, if you want to go ahead and participate in this poll. And so while we're doing that, one of the questions that was posed by Lawrence is, at what point does the AI composition become original, despite being amalgamations or even extensions of other people? So as we're using AI to recreate these potentially historic moments in time, at what point does it become original, whether you call it art or original representation? When we were talking about the previous legal question about what can you use this medium to say or portray about historically accurate events before it becomes art, my mind went to Abraham Lincoln Vampire Hunter. Which has nothing to do historically accurate with what Abraham Lincoln was doing, but hey, it's
so great.
entertaining film.
Yeah. I mean, this is the ultimate question, Lawrence. This is the question of artificial intelligence itself. Like, at what point does it become something new? At what point is Frankenstein alive? At what point does creation happen? I don't know that there's an answer, but I do think it's when there's some amount of, a flourish that is added, that is at least I would argue that that is the gestation of where creative transformation happens, that you have to add a gesture. You don't just, or you have to somehow frame it. I don't know. Do we have a role to play? I think we do. How much, I don't know, but something is involved.
I do think there may be some inspiration to be had from the fair use doctrine, transformative, how transformative the final art form is. Curation, for example, can be copyrighted. So a top 10 list of facts. Each fact may not be copyrighted, by the creation of that sort could be considered an original IP. I think there is some clues there of what we will legally consider it, but at the same time, I don't think the same logical steps that we've taken until now to come to a not so even ethically right currently situation. I think the situation right now may be legal, but musicians are not getting the correct rights attributed to their work. It's happening everywhere. So in terms of where it might go, I think we could look to these precedent cases to get some clues. But whether it should go there, I think, given the status quo being so unfair to artists anyway, I think it's to be determined. And Riyadh asks, can we copyright AI generated content? I believe Mid-Journey generated images are not copyrightable currently in the United States at the very least. But again, the curation of these images into a timeline, or how it's synced to video and music, that I believe can be considered transformative and copyrightable.
So I pasted in the chat the 4 doctrines of fair use. That's related to the political remix video I was talking about before. And so you can see that. If you would like any resources, we're going to compile a list of resources, ideas, and thoughts that went over in this. I typed in the thing. If you go to that telly.co/guide, we'll email you it. So if you'd like to put your name down there, then we'll follow up with all this stuff.
Yeah, and the just real quick, the results of the poll ended up being now 95% expressing that yes, AI art is deserving of a place in the conversation of creative expression. That's up from 85% at the beginning of this conversation. So it looks like about 10% of the audience has had their mind changed about whether or not AI art deserves to be considered art, at least at the beginning of the conversation here, as we're moving, throughout time, and this art form continues to develop. There was one additional question about a learning curve, and just to open this, just to make sure this is available for the audience here, for the folks who are interested in getting involved in this. The question is, what is the learning curve for a traditional video producer to begin using these visual tools required to use generative AI in production? And I'm just curious, maybe like a 10 or 15 seconds from each of the panelists, what do you recommend for someone who wants to begin using these tools in their art form?
Yeah, I can speak to that as we are an AI art school, and we specifically train many people who are video producers to learn AI tools. Our program is 4 weeks long, and we've had so many success stories about people who have pre-existing skills coming to our program, and within the month of the training, they have a new job as an AI creative in the world of generative video. And so if you have existing skill sets and a creative mind, you absolutely can learn these tools very quickly. You just need to be, pointed in the right direction.
Yeah, thanks, Caleb. Kento or Matthew, anything to add?
I would say that I'm not traditionally trained in code, but was able to ship a very AI product, which traditionally requires code. And that was due to AI taking some of the work and resources. So we were able to pay an engineer basically to do a lot of the heavy lifting, but a lot of what would have been otherwise spent on certain resources were better allocated to that. So we were able to take a marginalized voice, a Japanese American from the 40s, and give that a space to live and breathe with a limited budget. But I think through AI, I was able to do that. So in terms of a learning curve, AI does allow you to save some costs somewhere. So you might not, you might be able to even just use those saved resources to hire someone to help you out.
Yeah, it sounds very meta, like you're able to use AI to level up your skills in the field of AI production, which is one of the things that AI promises. Matthew, anything to add?
Just a lot of there's a lot of entry points, and I'd say get rid of the fear and just throw yourself in and try it.
Yeah. And that gets to one of the other questions that we had here about what we've been describing here is only the tip of the iceberg about what we know, and that the future of artificial intelligence as it relates to a variety of industries and verticals is yet to be discovered. And it might be literally tomorrow where new tools might be made available that completely change the conversation that we've had today, and that there is plenty of newness to come for us all to discover and to answer. So no, I definitely want to thank everybody for being a part of this discussion and this conversation. Thank you so much, Amanda and the Telly Awards, for sponsoring or for promoting this conversation, for bringing everyone together. This has been a fantastic discussion. Amanda, do you have any closing words before we let everyone go?
No, thank you so much. If you do make generative AI art and you're mildly curious, you can submit it by April 5th. Lots of categories, well, lots of opportunities for recognition in the realm of that and other stuff. So April 5th is our last deadline for the Telly Awards. But beyond that, I'm just grateful to have this conversation as well. And thank you for hosting us.
Of course, absolutely. Yes, please do submit if you're at all interested in this space. I've been affiliated or following the work of the Tellys for a long time, and the type of art and video and content that they help promote and surface is absolutely phenomenal. Again, this has been a production of the National Arts Club in New York City, specifically about with the Art and Technology Committee that explores the intersection of technology and art And we've been really pleased to have this conversation with everyone involved. We're going to continue conversations about emerging and frontier technologies as they relate to art. So if this is interesting to you, then definitely sign up for our mailing list, view our other virtual events. And if you are in the New York City area, please do come by our facility, our clubhouse and art galleries in New York City. We would love to see you there for some other in-person events or just to come and experience the art that we have available. On behalf of the National Arts Club, the Telly Awards, and everyone here involved, thank you so much for joining us, and we hope you have a good evening.
Thank you. I'll see you.
Bye, everyone.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.